We're talking about work. And I need to, yes, Ryan gave us the cue that we got a lot of ground to cover, okay? And so I need to give you a little bit, if you missed last week or awakening to that a little bit, here's a little bit of review that of some of the key points of last week, Genesis 1 through 9, so we can get ready through 10 through Revelation 22. Okay, I'll promise you'll get to class at 10:30, don't worry. So last week we saw that the story of work follows the Bible's kingdom story. Kingdom is the big story, and work is going to follow that. But we note that we need to be sensitive to how we tell the story, in that we use all of Scripture, particularly the Old Testament, the part that is still pretty crispy in a lot of our Bibles. If you're not screening and things like that, we don't read it very much, particularly the prophets. So we're going to redress that today. We want to talk about the whole story. What does work look like through all the way to the end, not skipping right to Matthew. Two kinds of work we saw last time. There's Adam work. We were created for this. We called it the Imago Dei. It's what we were commissioned to do, including to expand the order of Eden's culture to the whole world. And we were intended to overcome all adversaries to that, which includes the spiritual ones. We saw that too. We saw Noah work enter the story. Noah work comes really from Genesis 9, where we see two kind of different approaches to the commission. Genesis 1, Adam work is commissioned, be fruitful, multiply, fill, rule, and subdue. Genesis 9 in Noah work now, with humanity slaved to the adversary rather than ruling the adversary, Noah work looks like be fruitful, multiply, and fill. Ruling and subduing is compromised, and you can check out the two lists there, and we saw them last week, Genesis 9:1 versus Genesis 1:28. So something's entered the story that complicates our work and our ability to rule and subdue, to create the aims and the means and the aims that God had intended is now labored. It is now in a confrontational sitting. It is conflicted. And so we toil still beneath this kind of work that the New Testament writers still know about. And they say, we groan, we have hope. The slavery's in bondage to corruption still. And so the culture impact that human work was intended to do as Adam work has been compromised. We also saw that the story still today looks that Adam work is making a comeback, okay, in the last Adam, or the second Adam that God has sent in response to our great need. And he will raise us up as new images to complete the task. And we will continue that. However, we still labor under Noah work. And so we come to the rest of the story, okay? Paul Harvey used to talk like that, didn't he? Or he still does, I don't know. So we're going to take a look at work Israel version. Let's keep walking this thing through Genesis, and we meet a person called Abraham. My nickname for Abraham is Bud, because Bud in reference to not some libation, but Bud in reference to a flower, okay? The bud of a flower. If you have just the bud of a flower, it's all there. The petals, the colors, it's all there. It just needs time to unfold. So what I'm saying with Abraham is God makes a covenant through which he will he will make the whole story come true, realized. So Abraham's covenant encompasses the whole thing, and the references up there for you. You see that there are three promises. Abraham will be a great man. He will have a great name. A nation will come from him through which all the families of the earth will be blessed. And so you see a repackaging of Eden's mandate already unfolding and placed in this bud of Abraham. But it includes a nation. We see that nation come on the scene for the first time in Exodus when God pulls them out, delivers them with a mighty hand from their oppression, and he brings them to a new land. He's had righteous people before. Well, they were a little sketchy there in Goshen, all right? If you read the prophets, they came out with some of their idols and stuff like that, so we had to get that stuff squared away. But they're still his people. But he needs a nation on the scene. And we need to see why that is. He needs a nation on the scene to give a model of the world of where, again, to remind us of our Eden destiny. And so I think Dumbrell gives us a good statement of it right here, of what Israel's supposed to do and what their work is supposed to produce. He says, Israel is offering in her constitution a societary model for the world. She will provide, under the direct divine rule which the covenant contemplates, the paradigm of the theocratic rule which was to be the biblical aim for the whole world. So don't skip over this part of the story. We get key insights into what Eden culture is supposed to look like when we look at how God sets up his nation, his people. Okay? And so we come to one thing that is a little bit missing in our worldview. A little bit poached out of kind of an anti-supernaturalistic, or one that's been a little bit tainted by that. In the ancient world, and this world too, whether we recognize it or not, there is a profoundly theological worldview that every nation composed of three things: a people, a land, and a God. Every nation. When God sets up his nation now, he is saying, now this is the means of the living God to confront false gods that enslave the peoples. And so you can't deal at the cultural, physical level without dealing at the spiritual level either, and God knows that, and Israel is supposed to be a pattern for that too. To model to the world what life under the living God and how that flowers out into encompass all means and all facets of human culture and work. If you want an interesting study sometime, check out Gods and Nations in the Old Testament. Run that through your concordance app, okay? And you will see how passionate God is for confronting, for showing them to be false, because not just so he can be all glorious, but so that his glory can free people. Because these gods are false. They can't speak, they can't hear. Why do you go and ask about the future from those who are dead? Is how the God of Israel speaks about these gods and those who would attend to them and be slaved by them. So that's the picture. Israel shows us what the world is supposed to look like. And so they have a model of work. And we see God's prescriptions for how they should work, how they should build their culture, what their society should look like, and it should be these four things. Israel's work should produce a just culture. No stratification of the super rich and the poor that is separating more and more, and the poor are oppressed and afflicted, and there was no way out for them. It should be a generous culture. Deuteronomy 15:4, there shall be no poor among you. That's the goal. Israel's culture should provide for the weak, for the marginalized, and be generous. The gleanings, all of the prescriptions in the law that were made to help the poor not be resigned to that condition. A prosperous culture. There will be no poor. There will be no self-interest that separates, that oppresses, that sells false, cheap stuff, false balances, and things like that. But a righteous culture was the root. That's speaking of the relationship to God. It would be God worshiping. There would be tolerance of no other gods. There would be no other work that made that kind of religion possible. No idol-making work. No culture that allows for false, illegitimate work like prostitution. That's the goal. And you see that explicated in the law. Genesis through Deuteronomy. But what happened? If you just take it from the work lens, it became exactly the opposite. Whoops, it's too far. They became an unjust culture. And this is not to say they were only like this. There were moments of high points of their culture. David brought them close to these things. They were prosperous. They were renowned. They were sought out. They enlarged their borders. They had moments. Let's not just paint it all dark. But by the time we get to the prophets, we've got centuries. We got centuries of injustice, of the wealthy oppressing the poor, of the afflicted having no recourse, of slavery even, indentured servitude that was not redeemed in the Jubilee practice that God had instituted. They weren't following that. It was a selfish culture. Self-interest made people cheat the scales, give bad quality to their products they made. We'll sell the poor for a pair of sandals, and we'll, cheapen the wheat that we sell. You read that in Isaiah 58. The culture of scarcity. The land suffers. Remember the triangle? God, people, land. Land is an interesting part of all the covenants in the Old Testament. Land is there. Land is a party to it. It's not like just people and God doing this thing. No, the land is either going to be blessed and fertile, prosperous, or it's going to be judged also and suffer. And so that's what it did under Israel. Scarcity, famine. The land does not produce. But they have a wicked culture. Prostitution, they have idolatry. If you want to read something just astounding about the level of idolatry, read Ezekiel 8 through 11. Just the depths of the depravity before the glory. God tolerates it no more before he leaves in chapter 11. That's the way their story was, but the story doesn't end that way. God sees this. He sees this. It's really kind of Noah work on steroids still going on. We saw this from Genesis 8:21 last time, that the thoughts and the intentions or the inclinations of the human heart are corrupt, are wicked from their youth. That battle still rages, and it's overcoming Israel. And Israel's a story of that battle still being real. And so God comes. And the prophets tell us of a new covenant. This is still Abraham's bud, okay? But it's now another unfolding of the petals. We see more detail. And this new covenant has 3 provisions, fundamentally. You can summarize all of the prophets in the hope of what they're looking for, and this is setting us up for coming into the New Testament here, because that's what comes chronologically next, is God must make a new heart. You can't change culture without changing the human heart. The line of corruption and need doesn't go down the educational process, institutional process, it goes right down the human heart. And so now God says, I will put my spirit in you and I will cause you to walk in my ways. So here's the root of work that is now going to be able to do, because it starts at the heart. And it starts by something of the spirit. It will lead to a new social order. It will compass nations. God is going to send his servant. He also calls in Ezekiel his prince. He will come and he will subdue the nations. And he will rule the nations. Not just the hearts of people. The aim is for an Eden culture over the nations. And the prophets saw this. And this would include a new creation as well. The land would flourish. It would be fertile. It would be prosperous. It would bring forth high yields, and work would produce. Human work would work with this new, even created, cosmic condition. And there's some passages for you, okay? The new covenant is all over. It's only spoken of as new only in Jeremiah, and that's what the writer of Hebrews, he quotes that at length, Jeremiah 31. But it's called an everlasting covenant, my covenant of peace. And it is robustly, it tells you what God's idea of salvation is. God's idea of salvation returns us back to our calling in Eden, to create culture by the work of our hands that would expand God's aims and his order to the world. We'd solve problems, and we extend what we deeply were made to do, following God's pattern for us. We see some of these passages articulate this hope. And brothers and sisters, this is something that resonates deep in our, we want this. We want to live under this. We don't want to just learn how to suffer better. No, that's part of the core. You get a faith and a hope that comes that way to do this stuff, or that stuff. Look at what the prophets say. And think about this in terms of culture and human productivity and work. It will come about in the last days that the mountains of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. It will be raised above the hills, and the peoples will stream to it. And many nations, note the nation, will come and say, "Come, let us go to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us about his ways and that we may walk in his paths." Now there's a conversion, an evangelism that you're going to see affecting the institutions of nations. For Zion will go forth, from Zion will go forth the law, even the word of the Lord from Jerusalem, and he will judge between many peoples and render decisions for mighty distant nations. Then they will hammer their swords. Here's some work. It's hammering swords into plowshares, spears into pruning hooks. Nations will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they train for war. No war industry, no defense industry. One more. Key part of the prophet's promise was a return of Yahweh, God himself, to this earth. And we know from the apostles that that person's Jesus Christ. This is what the servant will do. The prince that God sends to enact Eden culture on this world. He will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what his eyes sees. He will make a decision by what his ears hear. But with righteousness he will judge the poor and decide with fairness for the afflicted of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. We want this. And so here's a picture of what the prophets saw, and it's a return to Eden. Okay, we saw last week Eden was a bounded garden. It had borders. Adam and Eve were called to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. That means expand the order of Eden, the sacred space of Eden, to encompass the whole globe. Only here the prophets, they have it, that's supposed to be Jerusalem, okay, the star, the center. The prophets paint the flow not out from Eden, wherever that was, the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, but their picture is it comes from Jerusalem. Messiah comes back to Jerusalem. He doesn't come to LA, New York, Moscow. No, Jerusalem is ground zero of this cultural expansion that the commission envisions. So now we're ready to come to the New Testament. See how I covered from Genesis 10 all the way to... Yeah, but now I just have 27 books in 10 minutes. No problem, okay? The lens of work will help us streamline the story down, but we see a couple of things here. We see the king appears. He appears, Jesus is the king. He's also called, in the Christology of Paul, the last Adam, the second Adam, Romans 5, 1 Corinthians 15. But then he leaves. Lucan scholars call this the absentee Christology of Luke's writings in his gospel and in Acts, where Luke records the first coming, but also the ascension. And he's absent right now. Luke also tells us in Luke 19 about really the character of the age, where Jesus says a parable about himself. He says, a nobleman goes to a distant country to receive a kingdom. So that's very clearly a picture of what happened to him. He has left. He has received a kingdom. He's a king with authority. But you read on in Luke 19, what's going on in the kingdom? You got two kinds of folks. You got his folks, his servants, whom he has equipped with all the resources to carry on. But he's also got another group who say, we do not want this man to reign over us. Both are allowed during this period right now to do their thing. When he comes back is when he's going to call accounts to his people. And if you read on in that chapter, Luke 19, 26 and 27, bring these enemies. As for these enemies, bring them here before me and slay them in my presence. He'll take care of them when he comes back. So we're still not finished with the story. We know who the king is. He has authority, but he's not here. But he's left. He's come in a different way, you could say. The Lord is the Spirit, Paul writes to the Corinthians. He has poured out the Spirit. See, Jesus rose from the dead to go to the right hand to pour forth what Peter says you see at Pentecost in the first sermon. Poured forth the Spirit. That is the presence of Jesus now. And we could have a long discussion about, what is the nature of the reign of Christ right now? What is the nature, maybe how the prophets and the apostles, how they do or how the apostles read the prophets, they need to tweak, redefine, recalibrate. Maybe the prophets got the order wrong. Maybe they call for a lot of things we can do kind of spiritually when the king is still gone. But everybody agrees Noah's work still labors on now. We have a king, but he tolerates an adversary who can still do destructive things, who can still corrupt and compromise our work, and to make the achievements we have out for beauty still serve ugliness. To make the achievements we can work for order and justice still be compromised by corruption. We're still in this culture. And as we said last time, know a work now of God's people we will not. And the New Testament doesn't talk like this. Look at how Miroslav Volf says, I think he's right here. He might be a little stark, but he's right. The New Testament is very sober about the achievements our work is going to do right now still. We're really kind of in a preparing mode, and we're still waiting. He says, I don't see work as an instrument of cultural advancement now. No, we're still Noah work. We're Adam people. We're learning our Adam calling, but Noah work prevails. Very quickly, I'm going to take the summary. Now, see how fast you can get? Now already to Revelation, okay? Revelation sums it up for us, the New Testament here. Noah work prevails. Noah work is going to even rise. Culture, if you read, I don't care whether you're preterist, futurist, whatever up and down preterist or ist you are, Revelation is not painting a happy story. Antichrist, the spirit that is now working, will still more and more dominate culture. The rage of the adversary will still, at some physical level, take lives, make persecution, call out martyrdom, and produce this kind of still Noahic struggle. But that's not the end of the story, according to Revelation. Check out this passage to the Thyatirans, earlier parts of the book. It's all about overcoming. It's how to be an overcomer, the book of Revelation, the pastoral intent there. And this is what he says. Look at what he promises them. He says, hold on to what you have until I come, and to the one who conquers, who overcomes, and who continues in my deeds, I will give authority over the nations. Here's a familiar theme we hear from the Old Testament. This kind of aim is still in our hands, but it's still future, okay? He will rule them. That's a citation from Psalm 2, which is a paradigmatic text for the book of Revelation. Psalm 2, why do the nations rage and the kings and leaders devise a vain plan? The Lord has set up his king. So the Lord is overseeing still what's going on now, and he will come and set things right. And he will rule. And it says here we get to join that, and that's the Eden thing happening again. We call it the millennium. This statement, I think, captures it right. In Revelation 20, we've come from Christ's return in 19, and it's an answer. And for those who think the millennium is just one verse, they don't get the book of Revelation and they don't get the Bible. The millennium is an answer to the cry of the martyr, the suffering of the afflicted and the oppressed now. It's what the prophet said we long for. It's what Eden says we're made for. So let me summarize this. Where is work now? 3 quick little points. Work now is a means of learning to love. For it's in the crucible of the office or the workplace when you're shoulder to shoulder with folks of a different culture or different values, your ability to love and sacrifice and give is going to be tested and honed and sharpened. That's why slave and master talk appears in the household codes of Colossians and Ephesians. These are all domains. These are all kind of studios where you're going to learn how to love. Parents to children, the church, your work, put in the slave-master language, the husband and wife relationship. All of these are studios to learn to love, to be generous, to be self-denying. Number 2, work now is a means of witness to a different culture, a different value system, one that is able to risk things this world will never risk in their work, like their job security, like their reputation for doing what is right. The world won't risk those things because they don't believe, they don't know that for the believer can because they know God's got these things covered. And so you can do right, trusting Him, and model a different value system in their midst. Work functions as a witness. But finally, what we do now in work is not going to burn. You still have hope, even though your work may be compromised. Someone may take your achievements for their own. Corruption may suck the life out of things you've worked all your life for. You can still know that the hope, what you are doing now, is not lost. One day, under the tutelage and patronage of the Messiah Prince ruling this earth with justice, the fruit of your labor now will be foundational and used and leveraged to solve the problems that plague us. Solve war, solve injustice, ugliness, lie, hate, and exploitation. We were created for this. In my studies of the kingdom of God, I ran across at that time it was Eastern Germany. East Germany was a satellite of the Soviet Union, and one of the most, one of the biggest works that I had ever run into about the kingdom of God and the teaching of Jesus was written by Ernst Bloch, a Marxist, atheist, theologian. He wrote a ton of stuff on Jesus and the kingdom. Why? What was attractive about Jesus and his preaching of kingdom to a Marxist? It was because Jesus was a preacher of utopia. That's the kingdom. The story is utopian. And the longing of the human heart that even the Marxists was grabbing onto and wanted to from the work of their hands, Jesus, they could tap into him at kind of a weird way. Because they didn't get it that you can't work with the king unless you know the king, right? But the story of Scripture is for us to work with the king because we've been brought and reconciled to him. And his work for this world is utopian, and we get to participate in it. We don't have to wait for heaven. No, we will overcome the adversary with the fruit of our work. That's the prophet's story. That's the story we were made for. May the Lord bless you and let this story inspire you to go out and persevere, press on, stay faithful, steadfast.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.